there, and welcome back to our Bible study series. Today we are going to study 2 Chronicles 23. So let's go ahead and get to it. In the 7th year, Jehoiada showed his strength. He made a covenant with the commanders of units of 100, Azariah son of Jehoram, Ishmael son of Jehoiahan, Azariah son of Obed, Messiah son of Adiah, and Elishaphat son of Zichri. They went throughout Judah and gathered the Levites and heads of Israelites families from all over the towns. When they came to Jerusalem, the whole assembly made a covenant with the king at the temple of God. Jehoiada said to them, "The king's son shall reign, as the Lord promised concerning the descendants of David. Now, this is what you are to do. A third of you priests and Levites who are going on duty on the Sabbath are to keep watch at the doors. A third of you at the royal palace, and a third at the foundation gate. And all the others are to be in the courtyards of the temple of the Lord. No one is to enter the temple of the Lord except the priests and Levites on duty. They may enter because they are consecrated, but all the others are to observe the Lord's command not to enter. The Levites are to station themselves around the king, each with weapon in hand. Anyone who enters the temple is to be put to death. Stay close to the king wherever he goes." The Levites and all the men of Judah did just as Jehoiada the priest ordered. Each one took his men, those who were going on duty on the Sabbath and those who were going off duty. For Jehoiada the priest had not released any of the divisions. Then he gave the commanders of units of 100 the spears and the large and small shields that had belonged to King David and that were in the temple of God. He stationed all the men, each with his weapon in his hand, around the king, near the altar and the temple, from the south side to the north side of the temple. Jehoiada and his sons brought out the king's son and put the crown on him. They presented him with a copy of the covenant and proclaimed him king. They anointed him and shouted, "Long live the king!" When Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and cheering the king, she went to them at the temple of the Lord. She looked, and there was the king, standing by his pillar at the entrance. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets, and the musicians with their instruments were leading the praises. Then Athaliah tore her robes and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Jehoiada the priest sent out the commanders of the units of 100 who were in charge of the troops and said to them, "Bring her out between the ranks, and put the sword to anyone who follows her." For the priest had said, "Do not put her to death at the temple of the Lord." So they seized her as she reached the entrance of the horse gate on the palace grounds, and there they put her to death. Jehoiada then made a covenant that he, the people, and the king would be the Lord's people. All the people went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols and killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Then Jehoiada placed the oversight of the temple of the Lord in the hands of the Levitical priests, to whom David had made assignments in the temple, to present the burnt offerings of the Lord as written in the law of Moses, with rejoicing and singing, as David had ordered. He also stationed gatekeepers in the gates of the Lord's temple, so that no one who was in any way unclean might enter. He took with him the commanders of hundreds, the nobles, the rulers of the people, and all the people of the land, and brought the king down from the temple of the Lord. They went into the palace through the upper gate and seated the king on the royal throne. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was calm because Athaliah had been slain with the sword. Okay, let's get to my Bible study. So this one, I was doing some research and studying this chapter, and I came across where someone had called Athaliah the Grinch who almost stole Christmas. And so that's what I named my study also, because it's so true, and I'm going to show you here. So here we go, okay? Y'all remember God's promise to David, right? Back in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 25, we're reminded of it. It says, "Now, Lord, the God of Israel, keep for your servant David, my father, the promises you made to him when you said, 'You shall never fail to have a successor to sit before me on the throne of Israel. If only your descendants are careful in all they do to walk before me faithfully as you have done.'" But what happened to all of David's descendants at the hands of Athaliah? Well, she only thought it was all the descendants. That's how evil she is. She thought she was powerful enough to smote out God's promise. She was the Grinch that tried to steal Christmas. Why reference Christmas? I mean, when I'm recording this, it's March, right? Because we also know that Jesus is the descendant of David. And if all of his grandsons had been killed, there would be no Jesus. There would be no Christmas, which solidifies that Athaliah is the Grinch. So follow me here with review time, okay? We're going to look at all the characters of this story. We have the evil queen mother, Queen Athaliah. Then we have the good woman, Jehosheba, and the child king, Joash, right? Okay, so those are the three characters that we're going to look at. God's promise was teetering on the brink of destruction just 150 years after God vowed to David that his family would always rule and reign. So for 150 years, David's family was on the throne. Now, there is this blip in the road of the kingdom. Athaliah just thinks she is queen. Well, she really is queen for a time, for like 6 years, okay? But God had a plan. Satan cannot win. In the history of Judah, Athaliah is the only queen to rule. So Athaliah was the wife of Jehoram. Remember, he killed all of his brothers when he took over. She was the mother of Ahaziah, right? She married into David's family, but she is not a follower of God. We quickly find out that her religion is an infection from the north. It's not like she is neutral towards God. No, she opposes him tremendously every step of the way. She worshiped Baal. Now, let's go back to chapter 22, and let's look at verse 10. It says, "When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family of the house of Judah." Praise the Lord for Jehosheba, right? Verse 11 says, "But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from the royal princes, who were about to be murdered, and put him in a bedroom with his nurse." So, if Jehosheba had not had the presence of mind to do this, David's lineage would have been wiped out right then and there, and Christmas wouldn't be. Jehosheba is the half-sister of Athaliah. Think about that for a bit. If she would have been caught, she would have died too. This woman, Jehosheba, is a hero. For Christmas to be saved, Christmas had to be threatened. Talk about complete opposites. The promise of God was just one baby's heartbeat away from vanishing. When God promised David, he exposed his promise to the turbulent human happenings. Think about that for a little bit. It was spoken, and therefore it was known that David's descendants would be on the throne forever. And this lady decided that was not a descendant of David, decided that, nope, that's not going to happen. We're going to wipe him out. Wipe them out, I should say. So now Joash is being hidden in the temple. What a great place to grow up. His first memories would be that of a Christian. He would be surrounded by all the things that go on in the temple, despite the evil queen that is ruling at the time. So what a 100-degree turn from the other kings in the past. I mean, we've been studying these other kings that are just awful, right? They don't do anything that is honoring to God. There are some, but there are more that let evil reign. I guess there was so much bloodshed that the queen never suspected any of her grandchildren survived. That just still blows my mind, that a grandmother could knock off, kill, murder, whatever word you want to use, her grandsons. Just blows my mind. How can you do that? How can anybody do something like that? So I have some questions here. And the nurse that Jehosheba put away with Joash, what was her name? Was she on duty 24/7 for 6 years? Or did she get some time off? And if she got time off, who came in to take care of Joash while she was off? Those are my human questions. God knows the story. He knows everything that happened. He had a plan. She also, the nurse, was a hero for doing this, because if she would have let it slip that this baby she was taking care of was one of the grandsons, she could have been killed also. So now we're back to chapter 23. Joash is now 7 years old. Can you imagine becoming king at the age of 7? How overwhelming. I just can't imagine that. We aren't told how the priest and his wife convinced everybody that this was actually a child from David's lineage. We just know they did. It took great courage on the priest's part to finally come out and tell everybody who this child was. I mean, if it didn't all play out right, the priest, could have been killed. It doesn't say it in the Bible, but God had a hand in this. I mean, God has a hand in everything, right? He made the minds of the people bend to the truth. You got to think about that for a minute. They have been living under this evil queen's rule for 7 years. These people probably are gun shy of believing anything. Yet this one morning, the priest has convinced the other priests the temple guards, and the Levites who this child is and what their plan is. To me, it's like a nighttime Navy SEAL operation. We've all seen those videos where everything just goes off like clockwork. And then things got really real after that, y'all. When he said, if anybody tries to get near the king, kill them. That's how serious this operation was. Because if anything happened to this child, David's lineage would be wiped out. And now it happens. The child is encircled by protectors. He is finally revealed, and the crown is placed on his head. Somehow, all of Israel knew, and the people yelled, "Long live the king!" And the evil queen said, "Do what?" What you talking about, Willis? She goes to the temple, and sure enough, there is the king standing right where he's supposed to. Verse 13 says, he was standing by his pillar at the entrance. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets, and musicians with their instruments were leading the praises. Then Athaliah tore her robes and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" It's kind of ironic that the one who committed treason is now crying treason when the actual rightful king is crowned, right? She was killed in the same way she killed so many, by the sword. Later, Jesus says in Matthew 26:52, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." And that's exactly what happened to Queen Athaliah. So this story in the Bible isn't really about a small country in the Middle East having its rightful king. No. It's about a covenant, a promise that the Lord made to David. And we have studied since David the covenant each king has and how they are to read it daily to make sure they are being the king God wanted them to be. And we have studied kings that either don't read them or don't follow the covenants at all. But that covenant wasn't put in place just to let it go by the wayside. No. The covenant was a very important document that was the roadmap to Jesus. In fact, in the covenant, it tells of a king that is coming that is much bigger than any nation. You see, the covenant spoke of the king of all kings and the Lord of all lords. When the priests read the covenant, he reads about a promise that no one could threaten. You see, when God makes promises, he keeps them. No matter if an evil queen comes in and tries to take over by murdering all of David's offspring, God is in control. No matter if Herod decides to kill all the children under the age of 2, God is in control. No matter if Pilate washed his hands and walked away at Jesus' trial, God is in control. You see, I may have titled this lesson, "The Grinch That Almost Stole Christmas," and there may have been a lady that saved the baby from being killed so that he could later be king. But in reality, God saved Christmas. He did it so that he could bring forth his son, Jesus, to die on the cross for our sins, yours and mine. So let's have a great week this week, and let's see how Joash rules in the next chapter. All right? It's going to be a good one. Talk to y'all soon. Bye. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Bible. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends.